to D&D Beyond. It is that week where we celebrate the many forms of delicious chocolate and candy. Oh, and romance. We celebrate many forms of romance, but also that other stuff. It's Valentine's Day week, and I am very excited because joining me today, please welcome back Riley Silverman, who wrote an incredible guide for us on the site that you can find in a comment running right now, called "How to Bring Valentine's Day to Your D&D Campaign." Welcome back, Riley. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm great. I am very excited for today, and I loved this guide that you wrote up. So, first of all, what do you mean by that? Bring Valentine's Day to your D&D campaign.
Well, what I mean is pretty much self-explanatory. It's basically like, hey, there's a holiday coming up. Sometimes it's really fun to bring some like real world topicality into your game to make it feel like it's a living, vibrant thing. I've had DMs in the past who have brought in like holidays as we come up to it, or found ways in game to give players like magic items as like a item you'll find when it's your birthday. Like your birthday present in game is this magic item your character finds. And I love things like that. And I love finding ways to translate real world occasions into functional in-game things. So when you're creating a Valentine's Day for in-game, you're not just saying, okay, it's Valentine's Day in this world, which I guess you could do if that's what floats your boat. But there's also so much exciting world building opportunities that you can have by taking a real world holiday and going, okay, how would a holiday with these similar tropes or these similar concepts translate into the world that I'm building? And by doing so, how am I also like informing my players of the world building that I'm doing? Because the way that people in a particular culture celebrate a particular holiday says a lot about who they are as people, right? Like there's a very different way that people might celebrate, let's say like Christmas is like an example. Like there's a very American way of celebrating Christmas. There's also like maybe like more of like a traditional like Yule in like Scandinavia and stuff like that. So there's always holidays that have evolved differently in different parts of the globe. And so same thing with your fantasy world. And even like example is like in Exandria, I think that like Winter's Crest is like a very somber holiday in Wildmount as far as I'm concerned, but it's like as far as I'm aware, I think it's like a wild like gala kind of party night in other continents. So that's kind of the kind of stuff that I'm thinking about.
I love that. And of course, I love the point that you make that this says something about the world that you're making because pretty much all groups of people everywhere are going to find sort of occasions for parties that are just going to look and feel different because everybody, that's just the thing that we need is some chances to celebrate stuff.
Yeah.
So you had some suggestions for first you establish the basics. What would be some big choices there?
Well, I think trying to figure out like what ways that people celebrate the holiday. Like, do they have a feast for the holiday? Is there a carnival involved? Is it a gift giving holiday? Is it in service of a particular deity? Because depending on which pantheon of gods you're using, there are gods of love or there's gods of fertility, which could translate into a romantic holiday in different ways. Like depends on how randy you want your holiday to be. So there's things like that. Are there
Turn your
special arts
safe
and
search off and
crafts?
Google those festivals or don't. That's a choice that you can make.
Hey, that's your decision. We're not here to judge either way. Or yeah, like for example, like we have Cupid and we have boxes of chocolates, which you mentioned earlier, which I love more than romance. So I think that like is there a particular treat that is associated with this holiday? So those are the kind of things that I think of as basics for holidays. And that's kind of like a nice guide to world building because like I said earlier, I think the more you can think of specifics as to what this particular region does for this holiday, that tells you a lot as a DM about what this world is like. And it also serves as a shorthand for the players to understand it too. Like, oh, this deity of love is very important to these people, and maybe like saying things that are against her might be considered like blasphemy in this area, or might be considered like a bad idea. And if you then you can have a fun like you could even like accidentally stumble into a fun encounter where you're bad mouthing like if you're in Greece and you're bad mouthing Venus, someone's like, hey, we take Venus very seriously around here and that kind of thing. I guess that would be Roman, would be Aphrodite. Sorry.
We're throwing you in romance jail.
Yeah. Yeah.
It could be very fun. So I love this
Horny
next bit.
jail. That's what they call it. So
It's true. Um, for the record, because it is thematically appropriate, and I'm going to find a way to use these later as we start to build our own example version of this. But I did bring a visual aid.
Love it.
Because some traditions deserve incorporation, however you make them work in your game. So next up, you have the origins of Valentine's Day in your D&D game, and I love things like that. Like a kingdom celebrates the anniversary of the wedding of a historically beloved monarch with feasts and songs of love. So,
Yeah.
what are some sort of ways people can go with that?
Well, hilariously, I based that idea on one time I was at IKEA and they were like serving cake, and it was because like the king of what is it, Finland that IKEA is from, or Sweden, whatever the king of
I
the country
want to
that
say
IKEA is
Sweden, but I'm
from.
very sorry if that's
Yeah,
wrong.
it was like the king's birthday, and they were serving cake in honor of that, and that like stuck in my head. So then when I was writing this piece, I was like, oh, what if it's like, oh, in the history of this nation, there was like this grand loving marriage between this one monarch and another. So then on that day, it's a celebration of love, but specifically the love of a monarch. So it might have a lot more of like a hoity-toity kind of vibe to it. It might be very, very formal love. Might be about like marital vows and things like that. So that's a lot more possibly like a conservative or like culturally based type of thing. And that actually might be kind of more on par with like the original like real world origins of Valentine's Day of like, oh, secret marriages under like, so there's like kind of this gravitas given to the origin of it. And so the people there might treat it with that level of gravitas. So that definitely gives you an idea. And also by doing that, you're also establishing like a level of monarchism amongst the citizens of that kingdom if they're all pretty on board with like, yeah, we all loved this king. He was like really famously really, and it's also propaganda because what if this king was like not that great, but over the course of centuries, it's been passed down of like, oh, what a great epic romance these two people had, you know? So
And you're gonna find the secret diary buried deep in a dungeon that exposes that the whole thing was a fraud or like a political marriage or,
yeah, it's like
I
when you keep like finding about like the other Boleyn girl or like things like that. Like the more you peel back about Henry VIII and things like that, the more intrigue and scandal you find, and maybe that's part of the story.
Yeah, and then boy, you can make a whole lot of different, festivals out of the things that guy got it up to. But,
Yeah.
sorry, that an element I love of that is that what you just suggested, choosing that origin, like, for your players, it's just like, "Look, there's a party." They don't even need to know why, but if you establish the why, you've given them either history, mythology, the values of the people around you, something that they believe in or rebel against, and
Yes.
all of those can be jumping off points for more story and more adventure, which is brilliant.
Yeah, and you create
Uh,
factions. I think I said later in the piece, like an alternate faction could be like, what if this kingdom like conquered another kingdom and now that other kingdom is being forced to follow these traditions of holidays and they're like, hey, this is our occupiers romantic tryst. We're not into this at all. We don't want to celebrate this holiday. Now we're being forced to. We have our own holidays. Like right there, you got conflict for a story.
all right, so let's get on to the trouble part of it. So,
Yeah.
what kind of festive encounters can you come up with for these settings?
Well, some of the ones I suggested, I thought of like thinking of things that you would associate with those holidays or with those tropes. So, like a tunnel of love was like an example that I had of like a mini dungeon you could run for this. And so, I mean, like tunnel of love is maybe more of like a carnival idea than a necessarily Valentine's Day, but it's still like in that overall my hands are really wild today. It's in that overall trope, it's in that overall like zeitgeist of things. So I think that I had a really fun time this past fall. I did like a harvest festival game and I ran like a fun house because I was thinking, oh, those are the fun things you'd find at carnivals. And I was thinking how when I was writing this, I was like, how much fun would it be to have like a wild puzzle dungeon, but the whole time you're on a swan boat in the middle of like a little river or something, and you have to like maybe like as you go from room to room, you have to solve a puzzle or you have to like face an encounter and you can't leave. Maybe somebody is stuck inside this tunnel of love and you have to rescue them, but you have to go through this like house of romantic horrors before you can get to them.
I love that. I love this from J Brown's 86. It would be cool to do a one shot where candy hearts are poisoned and the big bad evil guy is like a deranged candy baker, like a Mr. Freeze type.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, see, it's like the second you start to put these ideas of world building together, you just start erupting with ideas for how to run encounters within them, or also providing opportunities for players to create encounters for you. Like I
Mhm.
had earlier, one of the examples in the piece was, what if the festival of love is literally just the wine harvest is in and everyone's getting just blitzed on wine, and then people wake up and their purse strings have been cut and they have to go find the money that was stolen from like that. It can be that simple of an encounter, or you can have these elaborate tunnels of love, or you can have, I put an example of, it's the one time of year that this village celebrates like trysts and amorous things because they're usually so busy with the crops that they don't have time for all that. So this is like the one day where they just have this body raucous, bacchanal essentially. And so you have this young lover who's like, this is my one chance to tell this woman that I love her and to marry her. And then maybe like the families are like, we don't want this to happen. So they're like hiring either you to stop it, or or he's hiring you to get to her, and things like, there's so much you can do with it.
I love that. Let's take that one and let's dive in. How do we flesh out the one day only last chance for love kind of farmer festival?
So I think the first thing you do is you establish that town. So you know it's a harvest town. You know that it's a town that's mostly farmers. So when you're describing the city as the players arrive to it, you're going to talk about fields. You're going to figure out what crops are really important to them, and you're going to have like a hardy stock of people that are really like into their grains or whatever they're growing. And there can be a reason why. Like if you're doing this in Wildmount, it could be that because there's a war going on, this town has been worked to the bone because they're like growing crops to feed the war front, right? So that's an
Mhm.
example of that right there. So that builds you a little world building thing as well. If your storyline's been involving a dragon that's been raiding a while, like we have to replenish these crops because the dragon burned down the other crops, like things like that. And then you can introduce, as people are coming to town, if they go into a tavern, you can hear about, you can go a whole Romeo and Juliet vibe with it. Like, oh, there's two families in this town that are always, locking horns and rattling sabers. And so then you find out that, the young man or woman, we don't, it doesn't have to be heteronormative. It can be whatever relationship you want to make it to. But the child of one house is feeling some feelings for the child of the other house. They're star-crossed lovers. Their parents would not approve, and this is their one chance of the year. You can even go a step further, and maybe in this town, this is the only day of the year that you're allowed to get married outside of the constraints of like a betrothal or an arranged marriage without it being like a
Mm.
scandal, right? Like it won't affect your honor because you got married on Lover's Day or whatever you're going to call it. So
So the families have plotted to literally keep them separate from each other so that they can't take advantage of that freedom. So you actually just
yeah,
have to
it's
smuggle one of them to the other because nobody can stop them if they actually manage to ask the question today and only today.
yeah, it's like a romantic purge, right? Like in the purge, they're like, oh, we're going to lock ourselves behind these gates so people who can commit crimes still can't physically get into our house. So these parents are like, you're allowed to get married today, but we're going to keep you as far apart as possible so you can't get through this loophole.
I love that so much. Okay, let's try to put this into practice. So I'm gonna go over and I'm gonna start a new campaign. Just to you know, I'm gonna hit my create a campaign button. Um, Last chance for love is the name of this campaign. I'm
I
going
like
to put
that.
a sample description here because what I want is to get to my DM notes. All right, so I've got my private notes here as I'm just figuring this out. We need agricultural setting, rival families, uh, one day a year of open proposal permissions is what I'm going to call that until we have a better name for it. Um,
Yeah.
Now, once we have this going and we've established people and brought them in, of course, we want there to be some trouble along the way. Now, if we're dealing with Romeo and Juliet, then you're basically getting in street fights every couple of feet anyway. So that might take care of
Yeah.
itself. But let's say we want to get some like monsters in here, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna hop over to the encounter builder.
And I actually in the piece put a few thematically appropriate monsters that feel like Valentines or adjacent style creatures, so that can be perfect.
All
So if
right.
you're I think that, well, let's say if we're using this body like Lovers Day festival, like everyone's like, this is our day to cut loose. I think satyrs are a really good like monster because you can have like, oh, they're coming in from the woods. They're like, y'all are having a party. We're here to party, but they're partying at like 11 and the town's partying at like a 7. And that difference
Mhm.
of 4 is a major difference. And so maybe like they're going a little, it's almost like, yeah, they're going a little too hard for what this town is ready for. They're
The
like, "We're
party
only"
rating
yeah.
on the
Yeah.
satyrs is too high. Hmm?
Yeah. Yeah. The
Uh,
town is the Doozers, the Satyrs are the Fraggles, and a lot of stuff happens in between.
too much party. Is the
Too much
name of
party
this
for me.
encounter. It's not binding.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the town is no, I love it. The town is me, where it's like I like to party, but I also like going to bed early. So it's a little bit of both, right? So it's the town's like we were all ready to ghost, but you're all still going very hard, and we don't know what to do about it.
and they could even have been turn out to have been brought in by one of the families if we want to sort of sow additional chaos in the way. I'm gonna just
Yeah, the family
pop
could have
in.
brought them in to distract. Yeah,
Mhm. All right, so right now, one satyr they can handle no problem. Let's see. Two is going to be a little harder. Three is going to be a lot for my level one party to handle.
yeah,
Let's go there. Let's
yeah. This could be like the big challenge of the day.
go. And then we can add. Let's see. What a short summary for our satyr encounter would be. They're bringing the party a little too hard.
Yeah.
Mm. And are they carrying any treasure? Should we pop some treasure and rewards in here if you can manage to drive out the satyrs?
Yeah, I think there's gonna be, first of all, a box of chocolates has to be one of the award. I think in honor of your choice, there's a box of hearts that have been labeled with various, and they could be even, oh my god, it could be almost like if you wanna, like, create a magic item as a DM, it could be almost like the beans, like the beans that, like, create random, what are those called? The bag of beans, you know what I'm talking about? What's the name for it? But it's
Chat,
like
help me.
each there's like but in this example, the hearts, like each one might have a thing, and each heart might have a different effect. So you have to like try them, like, oh, this one does this, and this one does this, and so it's like one's a healing potion, and one polymorphs you into a bunny rabbit. Like that's like a whole wild, strange. You could have a whole charts of randomized things that these hearts do, and that's a fun little magic item to give somebody as a prize.
I'm gonna call them wild magic candy hearts until we know better. Hmm?
Perfect.
Bag of beans. It's just called bag
It's
of
just called
beans.
bag of
Thank
beans.
you.
What is that bag
Thank
of
you,
beans
Aaron Lore.
called, Amy? Because someone
Yeah,
tell me what the bag of beans is called. The bag of
but
beans. It
what
has
is
a
the
name.
name of the bag of beans?
Who is the
Much
bag of
appreciated.
beans?
Hmm? You can always homebrew up your own version of bag of beans that says candy hearts if you want.
Yeah.
Um,
Or you could just use
uh,
D&D Beyond to put bag of beans in your inventory and just change the name in your inventory.
customize. I'm gonna say we're gonna name the three satyrs and we're gonna name them after whatever I pull out here. So we've
Love it.
got real love.
Okay.
Is our first. Hmm?
It's a real pretentious name for that satyr. It's really
He's a true believer, I guess. Maybe you can appeal to that one with diplomacy. Hmm? Hmm?
I
Get him
can't believe
to
how many times
turn
I
on
asked
his.
what the bag of beans are called.
Hmm?
I see you, Dark of Nate. What's the name of that game with the dragons and the dungeons? I don't know. Let's figure it out.
This is Scott Pilgrim. What's the website for Amazon.ca? Hmm? Oh, the second satyr is Dream.
I like Dream.
From
That's cool.
a very hippie satyr commune. And the third one is Rockstar. So I think that's the hardest partier of all, really.
Yeah.
Um,
Or ironically, the like most chill of the three, but it's like just trying to be better about it. So like I'm gonna call myself Rockstar. Then I'll be totally awesome.
I love
Rockstar
it.
is the shy satyr who plays a bard in D&D because they're trying to be more outgoing and extroverted, so they play a character that's like that.
I love this very much. So now we've got some personalities for the satyrs. We've got let's save this. Hmm?
And that's fun as a DM
Du-du-du-du.
because then you know, you can flavor how they attack. Like, first of all, you could make Rockstar into a bard, or you know, however you want to have them do their attacks, you can now flavor them as like this one's a little more timid, this one's like, you know, and you can also, because we've already established that they're just there to party, their attacks might be like innocuous on their end, but they're still doing damage. But they're just like trying to put you in like headlocks or whatever. But they're just having a good time. You know, they're
Oh, I
dancing. They're
love
moshing
the
you.
they're let's flavor those out. So they have a ram attack, which is +2 to hit, reach 5 feet, one target, bludgeoning damage. I feel like the ram attack is probably the party headlock. I like
Yeah,
that.
I think so. It's like a mosh pit. Yeah.
They've got their standard short sword and short bow, and they have advantage on saving throws against spells and other magical effects, which I would say is helping them resist the effects of whatever the party intoxicants in question are, and
They have
whatever
a
else
very
you
high
might throw at
tolerance. They have a very high
them.
tolerance for partying.
So let's say they get past the satyrs. Any more surprises that might be awaiting them? Let's say they've made their way into the room where the young man is being hidden that they need to reunite with his love. Is there any sort of last surprise guard element that might come into play here?
I think you could either go another encounter, which is like a bodyguard hired by the other lover's family, or you could go with like a trap or puzzle of some sort. Like, oh, we've put them behind the security system and we have to solve the three hearts puzzle. I don't have one prepped for my head right now, but like there's a puzzle you have to solve to get in, and you're like, ah, you bested our plan. If you go with tunnel of love thing, it'd be like maybe like she ran away, she hid in the tunnel of love, and now you have to go in there to find her, and that's like how that plays out.
Oh. So what kinds of the hazards would you put in the tunnel of love?
Okay. Um, One of the ones that I did in my funhouse recently was I had like a stuffed animal, a stuffed creature that would dance, and then the players had to figure out that they were dancing and dance along with it. For Tunnel of Love, I might adapt that to make it like someone's crooning love songs, and the players have to like figure out a good chorus for their love song, or they have to figure out like a way of making that happen. There could also be a target, like almost like a carnival style like hit the target thing, but it's like a little cupid bow. So maybe it's a bow they have to use that has like a difficulty to shoot it. So you can't just use your regular bow and arrow stats for it. And then you like it's weighted because carnival games are weighted and they're stacked
Hmm.
against the player. So it's like a weighted bow and you have to hit a certain target to open a door or something along those lines.
I love that, like a bow in which no one is proficient because it's some bizarrely designed carnival bow.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's too light for the people who need a heavier bow and it's too heavy for people who need a lighter bow somehow. It's like enchanted in some weird way.
but at the
The,
end of it,
the
if your party can navigate all of these challenges and trials, they will be able to bring about that last chance for love. And you now have a fun holiday based memory for you and your party at the table. Riley, thank you so much. This was such a delight.
That's fun. Thanks for having me for this.
Where can people find you for more of this good stuff and maybe to stay tuned for some more on our site from you?
Yeah, obviously, I'm frequently writing for D&D Beyond and also on videos here with you, so you can find me there. You can find me on Twitter at Riley J Silverman or on Instagram at Riley Silverman. And I just launched a new version of my website, which is rileysilverman.com. So if you go on there, you can get a link to my authoring page, which has all the pieces that I've written for any sites across the board, and yeah, links to shows that I've done, including some live actual play RPG shows and some podcasts. I DM a Doctor Who podcast called Game of Rassilon. So yeah, check that out. So it's rileysilverman.com.
Thank you so much. This has been a blast. Everybody, check out that article that's running through the comments right now. And we have some exciting stuff going on and coming up here at D&D Beyond. You're going to want to stay tuned this week for a possible bundle sale. And of course, more details to come. Of course, you are going to want to check out the pre-orders that are running right now for Critical Role called The Netherdeep and Morton Cannon Presents Monsters of the Multiverse. If you haven't already checked those out, and finally, if you're watching this right now on Twitch, you should maybe stay tuned for tomorrow, February 9th, on our Twitch channel. We are going to start a mini series Wildmount campaign. Running one of the intro adventures from Explorer's Guide to Wildmount with yours truly in the DM chair and this frankly unbelievable cast of Mark, aka Sherlock Holmes, Lisa Pearl, Michael Galvis, and Emma Fife coming on this journey with me. Please tune in. That's just going to be here on Twitch. So I hope you will check it out and I hope you will dig it. And we will see you next time on D&D Beyond.
It's D&D.